Welcome to the Monday Club, in association with Find Insurance NI, your local commercial insurance broker. And this week we look ahead to the latest instalment of one of Ulster football's most enduring rivalries. Okay, I'm Neil Loughran, and today I am joined by Cahair and Kenny Archer. We're going to have a look at Tyrone, Armagh, bit of an origin story. First of all, before we have a look at the big one on Sunday. Championship is here. Can you believe it? Because I can. It just feels like it all just bleeds in.
You boys all hate the split season.
I know. I know. This is going to turn into just us gurning about the fact that, it still feels like it's
I can't believe it's in April, lads. Oh, God.
You need 3 weeks to get proper, build up, isn't it?
Yes.
Or coverage. What is
coverage? I proper promotion for the game. So the first 2 weeks of nothing, and then the week of coverage that you get.
The best thing about split season is the lack of the championship supplement that we used to do. A huge amount of work going into that, and our previous
you don't miss that.
Our previous sports editor moving it up from 48 pages to 64 pages to 96. Stop.
Yeah. And it obviously caught fire completely during the Noughties and whatever, which is the year we're going to be talking about. So yes, the first ever meeting between Tyrone and Armagh was in Blaris in 1980. Kenny, you were there? What was it? No.
1890.
What did I say?
Stumbling over your words and facts there.
Did I say 1690? Yeah. What did I say?
That was a whole different battle.
Yeah. I would like to say somebody got a hockey in at Blaris, but nice. It wasn't that big a scoreline difference. But I don't remember it.
No.
But I don't remember a match from about 4 years ago. So
this is it. But that's another podcast, Kenny, talking about your selective memory. But no, we are obviously going to talk.
I'm usually asking questions and I'm not able to answer them. Basically, that podcast.
But here, Kenny, you were there.
Remember you
wrote the report.
No, not so much actually. I would have. No, so obviously, we're inclined to talk about the last 25 years or whatever of it, but it is a rivalry that dates back. I remember listening to a podcast or Peter Canavan talking years ago about a challenge match or a pre-season game, 1990 in Castleblaney between the two of them, between Armagh and Tyrone, and I think him and a couple of others were the only ones that managed to stay out of the bother. The match didn't finish or nothing, so. But the nature of Ulster football is that these rivalries evolve. Obviously, we see at the minute Armagh and Donegal is the big rivalry. For a time, Tyrone and Derry would have been, at different times. But Kenny, you were obviously working with the Irish News at the time when this all caught fire in the early noughties. What's your memories of that? Of that slowly building to the boil? Because everybody knows about the underage, the great underage teams that kind of laid the foundation for Tyrone, but Armagh had obviously been building towards that point as well.
Well, I suppose it really, how it came about was 2002, you would say, was the big year with Armagh winning their first All-Ireland, and Tyrone had been pushing and had been, in the 95 final and the heartbreak of that. And then for their neighbours to do it, everybody in Tyrone would admit, that's what pushed Tyrone on then to win it in 2003. And obviously it was all the sweeter that they beat Armagh, took Sam Maguire off them in that first final involving, two counties from the same province. Before that, as you mentioned, there was always rivalries, but I had written about this. When you look at it, the clubs that are sort of either side of the county border, they're not big clubs, massively so. The Moy are there and obviously have produced a lot of great players, but they're not one of the historic big clubs, and the same with the Armagh clubs that are along there. So the rivalry really had to come at that inter-county level, and that came in that era. And everybody goes on about the games in 2005, and they were brilliant. 2002, there was a drawn game in Ulster and a replay, and the standard of football, I thought then, was really, really high. Tyrone had the young players coming through. Armagh had the team that was pushing and winning Ulsters and getting into All-Ireland semi-finals and then on that sort of stage. So that level then, when the two teams were actually, going to be competitive on the All-Ireland stage and going up against each other outside Ulster was really maybe the beginning of this sort of intense rivalry.
Cahair, you were about 10, or maybe not even. No, I'm joking.
No.
But you were young, and following that rivalry. What are your do you remember? Because you're watching it from the other side, I suppose, of the Tyrone border, and seeing, looking in at this kind of thing developing. What's your memories of that?
It's probably one of those couple of years of Tyrone Armagh games were the most important period in terms of my
Life.
love of football, because that was why I was so impressed. I was 15, 16, 17 at that stage, and you're either going to go that way or you're not. You could go to a million different things at that stage, and I remember watching those big games obviously on TV at that stage, because there was nobody in Derry that bothered who lost
going all the way,
or going all the way. So no, look, I have great memories of watching those games, and how frenetic they were and how intense they seemed from a distance. And it's sort of this is class. And it was also then the qualifiers had come along, opened up the championship to Ulster taking over in a sense. And then you had obviously Donegal were in the mix at that time as well, and couldn't get over Armagh particularly, and couldn't get past them. And those games between those teams and taking Ulster finals to Croke Park and all of that, it seemed like just a massive time for football and football up here, and it really kind of exploded. Now, in hindsight, it's never realistic that it's going to dominate Gaelic football for long stretches of time, because of Kerry and Dublin.
Yeah.
We will always have periods of dominance, but it feels like...
But Ulster hasn't had too many of those.
No, look, the early 90s
periods.
and that.
Yeah.
The early 90s and that. You talked about Tyrone
60s.
winning it off the back of... Oh, there he goes. There he goes with the 60s. The 50s, the 40s. You talked about Tyrone winning it off the back of Armagh winning it, but obviously Derry would have won it off the back of Down and Donegal winning it. So there was those spells in Tyrone then the final 95 as well. So they don't come along that often. And Armagh and Tyrone have won All Irelands in recent years, in 21 and 24, which is probably more. If you'd have said in 2018 or 19,
it's one of these things that you're talking about spurring each other on. Would Armagh have won that All Ireland in 04 and 24? Had Tyrone? No, obviously they would have, but that's an easy kind of point to make and place to go in the argument, isn't it? Wherever Armagh or Tyrone are, the other one's never normally too far behind.
That's it. Look, it was Paddy Heaney in the paper years ago. I remember writing about good fences make good neighbours, and the jealousy of looking over at what they're doing on the other side drive, and that is nationwide. That is in clubs and counties throughout. That.
Do you think there's something particular in Ulster though, where that is there's a bit more?
Maybe we're just more exposed to it too. I don't think, you go and ask Andy Moran about facing Roscommon, and so I think we're just more exposed to it here. Is there rivalries, if you like? We know them inside out, but I think there's plenty of Cork hated Mick O'Dwyer coming into the changing room and telling them they were the second best team in Ireland repeatedly, and there's loads and loads of rivalries that the Dublin Meath stuff, all of that. So
I think the difference in Ulster is just the range of rivalries. When you look at it, so you've Donegal and Armagh at the moment. Tyrone obviously have won quite a few Ulsters. Down, if I'm quite old, I remember Down winning Ulsters, and Derry obviously too in recent years. And Monaghan,
Down and Derry would have been a big rivalry
in the early 90s,
but Monaghan and even Cavan in recent years, and so you list all those and you get those, and they're all at different times will believe that they can win Ulster, and that adds to the rivalry. You don't really have that in Munster. There's only Limerick mostly. I know Tip did it in 2020, but there's only Limerick outside Kerry and Cork in Munster.
It feels like it's less geographical and more the sheer volume of teams that are competing against each other, as you say. It's we associate the rivalries with geographical borders.
Yes,
and it's not there's no reason for
it's
Derry and
supremacy, essentially, isn't it? It's whoever's on top at that point become the marked man.
That's it. And Tyrone and Armagh are probably, I don't know, it's a funny one for Tyrone at the minute because Armagh are there, they're in the top two in Ulster, and it's where are Tyrone really? And also, if you were doing a pecking order of Ulster right now, where are they? They're not. They're probably at different places on different people's lists.
Yeah.
Well, they're fourth at best because they're below Derry. Derry are a better team, obviously.
Yeah.
And you would think, well, Monaghan, if they get their players back and meet Tyrone, that would be a toss of a coin game, really. So that's what I would put. Tyrone
but
fourth or fifth
outside
at
the
the
top three anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, just in terms of the extent of the feeling around that rivalry, Kenny, in the Noughties, like it's a hard thing and to reflect on. I find sometimes if you're talking to an audience who maybe didn't experience it at the time, because they were the kind of games that you had to. They had a separate feeling of all of their own. Like if you were in them, like watching that and covering that at the time, were you aware? Because there's the famous story about the Irish News All Stars in. Was that
03?
what year? Was that 03?
And
And the Armagh players kind of came in. Don't even know if they had dinner, did they?
No, they definitely came in late to it, and they were wanting. Their approach was, entire focus on this All Ireland final, and they sort of were marched in late, almost like with a security detail, and didn't really engage with people there. And Tyrone were there all night and more relaxed. I mean, that wasn't the winning and the losing of that All Ireland final.
It's interesting,
But I mean, Joe Kernan would have admitted with hindsight, and some of the players have realised they were too focused. They were too, almost het up about the thing.
Free bar, like.
It's interesting that the teams themselves reference that quite often. Like if you read through their books,
funny,
read through interviews, like, they talk about that night a lot. And psychologically, I think hindsight has a lot to do with that. If Armagh had won it,
Definitely.
it would have been Tyrone were too loose. Tyrone were at the All Stars having great crack. They didn't care. And now it's, Armagh were too uptight, and it's all those things. It's a bit like watching warm ups, as you do, Neil. It's a bit like watching the warm ups. In hindsight, they looked, they didn't look right in the warm up. And it's like
not enough cones.
Whoever looks right in the warm up, like unless you make a complete hames of it, and you can hear the manager growling at you from the stand. Like there is a bit of nonsense around some of the psychology, and it is definitely lathered in hindsight.
But that's it, and nuggets like that we've spoken about the All Stars, all those things add to the legend of the thing, don't they? As it goes, they're all part of the fabric of that time. And when you think about it, it actually was quite a short period. Like, and I sometimes wonder, are we guilty of looking back slightly with rose-tinted glasses as this kind of glorious era of Ulster football, or, because the rest of the country wasn't necessarily thinking this is brilliant. Like the narrative outside of Ulster was a lot different than it was inside.
Well, it's funny. I wrote the match report from the so-called puke football semi-final, and you look at my take on that, and obviously I'm from Tyrone, so there's an inherent bias in that. But my take on that, compared to what some of the southern media were writing, and obviously what Pat Spillane said about it, were very different. And I just thought, well, Tyrone outplayed Kerry. They outworked them. I didn't see anything wrong with that.
I still don't.
No. Yeah. But I mean, some of the narrative surrounding that was almost, this idea of that these northern upstarts had come and broken Gaelic football, and like genuinely, what did they do wrong there?
When you compare it to what came after and the way Donegal went in 2011, like that was puke football. That was puke football. Let's be honest. Like and like I watched that famous tackle scene from the Kerry semi-final, and I often wonder how anybody came to the conclusion that it was puke football, because the work rate, and it was so high up the pitch. It was in Kerry's half. And to keep on battering them and trying to turn them over, and like it was phenomenal. And I don't know,
see, to me that's what defined it. It's those things, and I think what maybe gets lost in time sometimes is people nearly think that because the Donegal thing materialised at the beginning of the next decade, I think there's sometimes maybe an inclination to roll the two into one. But there wasn't, like with those Tyrone Armagh games and that rivalry, there wasn't the that controlled element, the possession, controlled possession. The slow,
games were so loose.
It was loose. It was frenetic, chaotic, and that's why it stands alone. Like, to me, you can't roll it in with what came after.
I think football generally was in a bit of a sweet spot from probably the early 2000s to the. And even for a wee while after Donegal came along, there was still a spell. You go back to some of the Dublin Mayo semi-final in 2012, or some of those games were still brilliant, end to end. Teams making loads of mistakes. They were a lot more loose than they were until probably Dublin controlled games then, and everybody went that way.
Yeah.
But for that spell, football was still in a real sweet spot. But it's interesting because I wonder what you think, Kenny, because it's often talked about that 2005 semi-final was the best game of football ever played. Do you think it was?
I'm not like you, Cahair. I don't watch games back that much, but just at the time, even then, I think it was that, I would sometimes say about games like gripping you by the throat, and it was that sort of game. It was so intense, like every ball mattered, every loose ball, there were 3 or 4 men around it. Yeah, in standards of football, you look back and it probably wasn't as good. I go back to those like 2002 games, maybe before Armagh and Tyrone were both a wee bit under the radar, and they were really enjoyable matches. I would love to nearly watch those back more. I wouldn't watch back the 2003 final. Like, it was a poor quality game, but obviously Tyrone played better than Armagh that day, but they didn't play great football, really.
Yeah, it's an interest. It goes back to what I was saying a bit earlier, like whether it's the kind of thing that you look back and revisit and it's not the same. Do you know what I mean? Like we spoke about this earlier, Cahair, saying about the sometimes when you're in those games, there's nearly like an intangibility to what you're feeling. You know what I mean?
When you're in the ground.
Trying to repeat that, watching that on Setanta Sports 20 years during lockdown. Isn't.
And it's why you go back, like the Derry Down 94 game was on TV during lockdown, like, and it was probably the first time in years I'd ever, because the full game's not on YouTube, or wasn't at that time. Like, it's probably the first time in a long time if I'd ever watched it in full. Yeah, because you never had access to it. I was so young when it happened, and it was like you could see why people loved it. Yeah. But it was more of a fluid game of football, and the place was packed and all that. But for me, like, I always go back to the 2013 All-Ireland semi-final with Dublin and Kerry. For me, that was the best game of football that was ever played, and that is where it was just at its real sweet spot, where players were so finely tuned athletically by this point. They are more so now, but they were at a point where the game was really athletic and fast, but it was still free as well. It was still loose and sort of devoid of the control that we have now. And I don't think we'll ever get that back. No. You can't unlearn control. Once team, we see it.
No matter what rules are tinkered with.
Exactly. We're now in a space where everybody's mindset is whatever the rules are, we have to find a way to control it under those rules, as opposed to, there's new rules, let's just go out and kick it, lads.
Well, you mentioned that great 2013 game, and the real turning point in Gaelic football probably was that 2014 All-Ireland semi-final when Donegal surprised Dublin, because then Dublin came back, and with Cian O'Sullivan as a sweeper and all was sitting, and it was much more of a possession game, and Dublin had all those fabulous footballers and they could play that, and you bring in soccer, and there's no doubt Manchester City have been a brilliant team under Pep Guardiola, but a lot of people don't necessarily like watching them. It's that control of games are a bit more free maybe at the moment than they were. You go back to the Spain teams that won those World Cups and Euros, the possession and the patience, and people would prefer, and I'll throw this in to please you men, but you look at that 1999 Manchester United treble team, they were exciting. The wingers, the 2 forwards, it was about attacking, even attacking fullbacks. And midfielders who would just win the ball and give it to the men who could play better. And the same in Gaelic football. That's why, going back to that era 20 odd years ago, yes, there were a lot of mistakes, but it was that competing for the ball. There were one-on-one battles still, and ball being kicked inside, not just being hand passed and recycled and so on.
I think, like, that's generally, and this sounds like wild pessimism, but sport has passed its sweet spot in every facet, in almost every sport in the world. The sweet spot was probably 15 years ago, and that's not a nostalgic
We
thing.
might have been having that same conversation 15 years ago.
But that's not a nostalgic thing. I think that you look back, it's almost as if it kept rising on a curve. But I think from that point, almost every sport, as a view and as a spectacle, almost every sport has declined and is struggling. Look at the conversation around the Premier League in the last years. How like even Sky, who are like they're paying billions to show this thing, and they're wondering aloud like this thing's crap. What are we doing here? Like this is unwatchable. And the set pieces and the throw-ins and all of this that's coming with it, and it's like it feels like it generally is past its absolute peak, and yet it still retains interest. People still watch sport, obviously all over the world, but I don't know that we'll ever just get back those
So
years.
what's been lost? Like what's been?
It's the element of control has taken over. It's like how do we control absolutely everything within the game? Data is
driven.
like I like, as you know, like I like data, I like stats, I use them.
Where's my understatement, Clarkson?
Nothing bugs me more than XG. Like XG, I do not understand because the idea of a number is that it's not subjective. XG, somebody still has to decide how good of a goal chance that was. What somebody's still deciding what your XG is. It's like that doesn't make any sense to me. That's not a number. So anyway, I
would better get back to Gaelic football.
We better get back, but it is. It's just and Armagh, to go back to it, Tyrone Armagh was probably the beginning of the real sweet spot, and I think that's why those games, because of the
perfect storm,
because of the intensity that the teams had, the physical energy to bring to them, there was so much tackling and so much physical contact and so much up and down, and you had cornerbacks attacking and you had wing backs attacking, and they were brilliant games in their own way. And then you got as far as Dublin Kerry in 2013, which was similar but different, same idea.
But to continue on with that, I mean, Kieran McGeeney would always make this point, and he's not, a nostalgia head. He's almost ridiculed the standard of the football back in the day. But the players now are so fit and they're so skillful that, the pitch is effectively smaller, and that's why you needed the new rules to create some space, because players could just cover so much ground and just keep doing it. And then, when men were tired out, you brought on your, load of subs, and the intensity never really dropped in terms of closing people down. So that's why, and the skill level, that, people weren't fumbling the ball, or they weren't just kicking it, away, they were kicking it to a teammate. So when you have that, control is the word, when you have that level of control, sport is entertaining because of mistakes. If there are no mistakes, there would be no scores.
Yeah.
So you need that little bit of just, it's harsh even sometimes to call it a mistake, but you need that little bit of room. You need that man being out of position slightly. You need
a mismatch.
You need a goalkeeper, not just quite positioning himself right for something. And when they're so good, so fit, so tactically organised, that's why the games can appear, and they are probably less interesting than they were in the past.
Because don't get me wrong, and all that, like I've always said, like, players are better now.
Yeah.
They're miles better now. So it's not a case of footballers are better in my day, or they could kick the ball. Footballers are far better now than they've ever been, and that's it's part of the problem. They're better than they've ever been, and everybody's on such a level that it's very hard then to create a spectacle when everybody's at such a high level.
You can sit and stroke your chin and go, "This is unbelievable." It's
and that's like football. It was only for chin strokers. Really, like it was Gaelic football and soccer to an extent now too. Like it was really only for people who enjoyed tactical battles and breaking down as something to just sit down and watch. And like the number of inter-county players that we would have all spoken to, and I've spoken to over the last 7 or 8 years, who would say, like, I could think of nothing worse than sitting down on a Sunday afternoon, putting on TG Cahair and watching a National League game. It just was not watchable. It was not a sport to watch.
Yeah.
And I think it is now. And whatever there are flaws, there are always going to be flaws. But it's better now than it was.
How did we get into that?
I don't know. Throwing Armagh, lads.
We'll wrap up this segment about Tyrone Armagh, the history of Tyrone Armagh. Just going to pick our favourite moments from that rivalry in the Noughties. Kenny, you go first. What's you lived it?
Elder statesman.
You know, you defer to you. Is there any one point in that or one moment that sticks?
Well, I said to you just before this, I was tempted to pick the game in 2017 in Croke, where Tyrone just absolutely destroyed Armagh. But the truth of that is, and we sort of laugh about my memory, but I can remember matches. My only memory in life is usually dictated by sport and so on, of knowing, you know, what happened that year. Okay, my son was born that year, you know, that sort of thing. But I had to Google that one, and I didn't really, even though I think I was there, I don't remember much about it. So the game I like from the Tyrone Armagh is not one of the obvious ones. 2001, and Armagh were the dominant force in Ulster at that point, and Tyrone were rebuilding, and Big Art McCrory, God rest him, and Eugene McKenna were the management team, and they brought in a lot of the young, the under-21 players that Mickey Hart was developing. And like, it was a really memorable moment. I think it was very early in the game, maybe the first minute, that Owen Mulligan, Muggsy, scored a goal from a sort of tight enough angle past Benny Tierney, and he was so unknown, he was still being referred to as EOIN at that stage, and in the match reports and so on. So Muggsy, and actually I had the old memories. Not so
was he
great.
blonde or ginger at that stage?
I don't know what he was. He might have been a brunette, but I'm trying to find the details. I can't even find where I printed out there. But there was quite a few of the, you know, Brian McGuigan, Stevie O'Neill, I think, had a great game that day. Ricey, Ryan McMenamin. So there were some of the young players for Tyrone that came on that day that didn't really go on to be, you know, the superstars, but that was the sort of turning point for Tyrone. And in some ways it was the turning point for Armagh too, because that was the end of the two Bryans era, even though they went on in the All-Ireland series. But then Big Joe Kernan came in and made history.
These
with
were
Armagh.
the final parts of the jigsaw of both counties.
What was yours?
Mine, well, there's obviously loads to choose from. Like when you think of like Muggsy deferring to Canavan with the late free and stuff, and the McKenna Cup game. Probably using all your ones here. No, but like the one that sort of I went for is the league game in Omagh in 2003 when Tyrone didn't give Armagh a guard of honour onto the pitch, and I just love that sort of.
I think I just forgot.
I'm sure it was just
Easily
an oversight. Like, and Armagh hadn't lost, I think, in almost a year at that stage, and Tyrone beat them, and it was just a wee bit of the litmus paper kind of
Feverish stuff.
Yeah, it was really great. What about you?
Probably go for the block. In fairness, see, you could pick any number, but I just love it as a piece of defending. Like, I just think it was unbelievable. As like, remove the circumstances, as a piece of defending, it was incredible, and then put the circumstances in on top of it, that it effectively won the All Ireland. It was.
And who he was blocking.
Like, I remember during COVID when we were exhausting our creative avenues.
Top 15 blocks.
It wasn't far off at one stage. And I remember ringing the two lads, ringing Stevie and ringing Conor Gormley, and doing a piece about it. And I think the thing that sticks with me is that Stevie said to this day, like, he didn't see him. He didn't see Conor Gormley at all in his eye line. Didn't see him in the corner of his eye. Didn't see him coming. And the only time he saw him was when he was on his foot blocking the ball. And it was the fact that, you know, Stevie was so good on the left leg that had he seen him, he probably would have either gone on the left or stepped back inside him, or he probably still would have scored. So it was time, like, you know, talk about luck. And it's, you know, there's very, very little of that is owed to luck, because it was brilliant defending, but just the luck of being at the exact right split second.
And
where
even
Stevie
just the
couldn't see
look
him.
of being out of his eye line, as you
Aye,
said.
Absolutely, that's what I mean. Yeah,
Because when
being
you watch it back, you can see that Stevie maybe just holds on to it just that
that split second, like,
and that's
and
it.
it was, they'd been taught from they were no age. Mickey Hart had, he would have said to them as defenders, like, if you're doing nothing, get back in. If you're not marking somebody, if you're not contributing, get back in and cover the goal. And it wasn't even like a sweeping position; it was just an instinctive thing built into them over years that I'm doing nothing, I'm caught out of the play here. The ball had gone under Gormley's head. I'll get back in and do something, and he did, and the rest is history.
There we go. We'll turn our attention now, I think, to Sunday. Will we? The start of the Ulster Championship.
2025.
You're going to run through
a full year behind
the
myself.
26. The start of the Ulster Championship at the Athletic Grounds. Tyrone, Armagh, and probably indicative in some ways of where that rivalry has gone to in the years since the mid-noughties, where it has fluctuated. Tyrone probably largely, had more success over that time, but Armagh definitely ahead in the pecking order at the minute. I'm just wondering, Kenny, like, so much has been said and written about Tyrone through the league and through the last number of months, and about where they are coming into this, and I just can't help feeling that this is just the perfect way for Tyrone to be going into a game against Armagh in the Ulster Championship, in the sense of like the mentality that bronca, to borrow an Argentine word, sorry,
Loves
it's probably Spanish actually.
Yeah. Argentine's not a language.
Argentine's not a language, but an Argentine football term. Sorry, but the kind of feeling that very few are giving Tyrone any chance this weekend, I think it'll be fair to say.
I think
although Cahair's gonna buck that trend a wee bit shortly. Go on.
I do feel that's the thinnest of very thin straws for Tyrone red hands to clutch at. It's like, just to widen out a wee bit. I'm looking at Ulster, and ahead of the semi-finals, I only see one contest, Cavan Monaghan. I think the other ones, I would.
You think it's that bad? Do you think?
I would be stunned if Tyrone beat Armagh.
Do you think Down won't give Donegal something in Letterkenny?
They'll give them something, but do you think Down will beat Donegal in
But
Letterkenny?
there's a contest and there's one that.
No, that's what I'm saying. Though I'm talking about if you had to say, right, I'm going to name the teams that are going to win these matches. You're going to say Armagh, you're going to say Derry against Antrim, and you're going to say Donegal against Down. So Cavan Monaghan's the only match where you think, I'm not sure who's going to win that. So yeah, there's not a lot of hope around Tyrone at the minute, and because Tyrone, they have had difficulties, they've had injuries and various issues, but Tyrone have gone backwards this year, and Armagh are a level above them, literally, in the league, and Armagh should have probably finished higher in the league, but for some, they did get the rough edge of a few refereeing decisions in very tight matches that you'll get in Division 1. They created a pile of goal chances and took very few of them. Tyrone only played in fits and starts, and like it's possible. Everything is possible in the Armagh Tyrone rivalry, because I've always said it's generally been, a close one and mostly close contests. Last year showed that, but I don't go into this match thinking, yeah, this is going to be tight. It would need a big upsurge in form of Tyrone and quite a lot to go wrong for Armagh, especially in the athletic grounds. I mean, I wrote that ahead of that game last year. I had to write a sort of tongue-in-cheek piece of why
3 reasons why
why Tyrone would win, but I felt they had a puncher's chance that day, and Tyrone were actually closer that day than I expected, without even playing particularly well, in my opinion. But over the pace, Armagh deserved the victory. But ahead of this one, let's just say I'm going to Donegal for the weekend with my wife and on a pre-planned trip, and I'm not too disappointed.
You'll not be
about
tuning
that.
in. Okay. What do you think, Cahair? Like, because Armagh probably delighted the way they finished the league. Obviously, the Dublin game, the way that they came back against Cahair, I'd say they're pretty happy with where they are. Do you buy that notion of Tyrone being complete outsiders here, or like, and where and how have they gone back so far, or did we misread where they were last year? Perhaps, you know, is the truth somewhere in the middle?
I think if you'd asked me that same question 24 hours ago, I might have a different answer for you. I would have maybe fallen into some of those camps myself, like, and looking at them and thought they're a long way off it, and they are playing poorly, and they are. I don't think we misread them last year in terms of part of it was the draw. You know, if Tyrone had got Cahair in the quarter final and Armagh had got Dublin, Armagh would have been the team that got to the semi final. You know, so there's a wee part of that, but Tyrone were still. You know, they still beat Dublin, they still beat Donegal and Ballybofey. You know, those are good results, and they still could and maybe should have beaten Armagh and Clones in the first round last year. So, I never felt at any stage last year like they played well.
No,
I always
they
felt
they were hanging in.
I just felt that they were operating at 65% or 70% of what they were capable of, and if they ever clicked, they could just explode and take off altogether. Like, but they just haven't clicked, and there's a lot of factors. One of the factors that is just the general sort of apathy around the county and the lack of crowds, and just everything just seems so dead and flat around them. It's just like, it's exasperating. You know, I have to go and watch Tyrone again this weekend, kind of thing. That's the way it feels. That's it, or not exactly as people are doing. Like, so that's all feeding into it. But like, I would make a case for Tyrone in the sense of I don't think they'll win on Sunday, but I think more of that is about where Armagh are at than where Tyrone are at.
Okay.
I think Armagh's performances have been much better than their league position
and the results
suggests,
reflect.
than the results reflect. Like, I think Armagh have played really, really well in some of their games. Like, were miles the better team against Galway and got beat because of bad goals, you know, but in terms of the overall performance, they were easily the better team against Galway. So things like that, I think Armagh are at a really high level considering the players that they've lost. But just things about Tyrone that you sort of didn't really notice, like in the Meath game, like they won 2/3 of their own kickouts and more than half of Meath's. You know, that's a lot of possession. That's a huge amount of ball to have in your hands to then do things with. And there's almost this
but
sense.
Is that not the problem? Has that not been the problem with Tyrone for the last year?
Yeah, that is, but there's also a bit of a narrative of how small they are around the middle eight and how they're struggling on kickouts and how they're so reliant on Brian Kennedy and how all these things. And it's like, when you actually look at the numbers, you know, and the Cork game was actually very similar. You know, they actually dominated the Cork kickout. They won half of Cork's kickouts in the first half and 2/3 of them in the second half. So, like, and Cork are a big side, and Meath are a big side, and effectively they are both Division 1 sides. You know, they're both going up, and I think they're both better than the teams that are coming down. So that has to be factored in. Are Tyrone playing as badly as people think they are? The thing is really letting. There's two things that I see are really letting them down. One is finishing them off, which sounds like the simplest thing in the world. They're creating an awful lot of chances, and their shot selection, the type of chances they're creating, they're shooting from positions they don't really want to be shooting from. They're not probably getting inside teams and really hurting them, but they're also missing. Like, they won 5 of Meath's first 7 kickouts and created 2 goal chances off it and missed the 2 of them. If those 2 go in the net, like, that's a totally different game. So, like, are you playing badly, or are you just missing chances off the loads of possession that you're creating? And the thing with Tyrone is they have the quality. Like, we know, if you look at a Tyrone 15, you can't say that there's no way that whatever Tyrone 15 comes out on Sunday, there's no way that 15 could beat that Armagh 15. You can't say that because you know the quality that they have, and if they click, they would beat Armagh, or they will go very close to beating Armagh. So it's getting it. But look, we've been saying that for a while. It's getting it to click. The other thing is at the other end, and this is where I really feel they're in trouble. And this is where I'm making a case for them, but where I feel they're really in trouble is defensively. You look at some of the goals they're conceding and some of the chances that they're conceding, and a lot of it is down to communication. You know, and you look at their team sheet, and there's a real absence of leadership in their defence. And you actually watch them, and you can almost see that there's visibly nobody talking. nobody telling men to pass men on, to drop off. There are runners coming through them who are going completely unchecked, not being picked up. And if that happens against Armagh, the way Armagh's forward line is producing scores, they could actually get ripped to bits if that happens again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, then we're into the debate around Morgan, and we're into the debate
That's
around
where I was
McKiernan. Exactly, we're into that. So if and that's a big one. Do you go with Morgan for a communication point of view then? Do you play him, aside from all the other things, do you play him for that reason, that he can talk to players in front of him and keep them right? And
when he's out of form, and has been out of form.
Even when he's out of form. Because Oisin O'Keefe, if you look at him, has actually done really well. Now, he's unorthodox as a goalkeeper, as shot stop, and he's not as competent at all as Niall. But his kicking has been immaculate at times, and he's got a big hammer of a right boot on him that he's hitting way, way over the far 65 in Croke Park. So in the athletic grounds, that's a big hammer to drive down on top of a team. I would say,
So does Niall Morgan.
I'd say arguably a bigger, as in he's less. He needs less of a run up, it seems, than Niall. Even though Niall can do it pretty swift as well. But just feels like there's a lack of predictability. But his kicking is, Niall Morgan was out of the team because his kicking was poor. His performances hadn't been great, and so it's whether you go for performance or whether you go for, we need this wee bit of experience, we need something to come in, and then you're into McKiernan as well. Does McKiernan come back into the team? And
you wonder with Morgan whether it's a case of dropping him out in those last 3 games to with Armagh in mind, to maybe that bit of a, I don't want to say kick up the arse, but I just did, like to basically say, okay, well, this is the focus here.
I think, well, that's the word I was going to. I think there maybe is an attempt to get a bit of refocus from Niall. He was away. A friend's wedding, I think, was, as we know, part of that, and that factored into going out of the team. But Cahair's talked about experience, and I think Tyrone are quite lacking in experience. At the other end of the pitch, Matty Donnelly is hugely important. And Matty didn't play against Armagh last year, and that because of injury issues. And had he been on the pitch that day, that might have swung it. Matty was brilliant against Cork in that league game, and he's vitally important to Tyrone. But I'm looking at the lineups, and you're mentioning there Michael McKiernan. If he doesn't start, we could be looking at Tyrone having two completely different half-back and half-forward lines from those that lined out against Armagh last year. So Rory Brennan is gone. Kieran McGeary had been away travelling and hasn't come back into the team yet. So the half forward line that day was Aidan Donaghy, Joe O'Goose, and Kieran Daly. Now Daly might start, but like that, if you're looking at 6 different players around the middle 8, that's so vital now again in the modern game with these battles for kickouts and so on. It's just building that level of understanding in a team is very difficult. Like some of the players that have come in for Tyrone, they're obviously good players, but they're just different. There's so much uncertainty over this Tyrone selection. Cahair's quite right. There's a huge amount of quality in there. Like when you're looking at Dara Canavan and Darren McCurry, those are really top level players. Big Brian Kennedy, Con Kilpatrick. I would love to see. Cahair wrote about it as well. I would love to see him further up the pitch. I just don't really think he works at midfield, but then you need his height and physical ability in there to try and to win some ball in there. But there's a lot of selection issues for Malachy O'Rourke. And you go into then this, I don't know how Malachy inspires this team. How does he lift them up? Because they have been so flat. And yeah, you can do this, you can be going in, well, most people are writing you off. The bookies have you fairly long odds and so on. But you have to put the belief into them that you can go to the athletic grounds and beat this Armagh team. And that's... Malachy O'Rourke is a really good coach and manager. He's proven that repeatedly over the years. This is a big job for him ahead of this weekend to get Tyrone going in there and really competing.
You mentioned a couple there, like McGeary along the McGeary Morgan connection.
Will McGeary come in this weekend? I have a feeling
I feel he might as well.
I
think he might, simply again for that reason. I think his communication and the way that he organises things and the way that he gets, even on their short kickouts, he's the man that finds the pockets of space so often and gets on the end of them. All those things he will organise. Rory Brennan has organised that Trillick team at the back for a long time. Rory Brennan is, and he's never had I'm not going to say a fair shot, but he's never played the amount of football for Tyrone that I would have thought he would have played for Tyrone. I thought different managers, and there must be some reason, but I've always looked at him and thought that man should be starting for Tyrone on a week in, week out basis, and he just hasn't, and so he's left again, and I think he's a big loss. Hampsey's a big loss. You take all of that experience out of the defence and you can see it. You watch them, you can see the number of times that they're not passing men on. They're unsure. They're runners coming through them, and I think Meath exploited it pretty well. Meath picked up on it and were sending runners in, and they were playing havoc with Tyrone inside, and then creating. We saw Jack O'Connor kicking 4 2-pointers, and a lot of that was down to lack of communication and them creating spaces by just dummy runs and decoy runs and men not picked up and all those things. So you're really seeing that, and Armagh are fluid. Armagh are a fluid team with the ball in their hands, and again then you're into matchups. So you're not sure of McKiernan playing, but you almost feel like he has to play because who picks up Connery? If he doesn't play, you probably have to go to Niall Devlin. So then who picks up Darren McMullen? Where Darren McMullen plays, we don't know because he played much higher up the last day. He played corner back against Donegal, but I expect him to play higher up, and I expect them. And then who picks up Cian McConville? And then so there are problems for Tyrone matchup wise if they don't play McKiernan, and Ben Cullen has played a lot of football this year, and Malky seems to like him, and he's in the number 7 shirt. Does Kieran McGeary come in there, push Ben Cullen to 5, and put McKiernan in the corner, or put Niall Devlin in the corner, and just strengthen yourself a wee bit, even though it goes against what you've been doing in the last 3 games of the league, at the point of just needing that wee bit of solidity and those couple of natural matchups that allows to occur. Because I would worry about their matchups if they don't go that way. So and the way Armagh are scoring, that's going to be a real problem then.
Absolutely.
I would say that we have to put out some positives for Tyrone. I really like Ethan Jordan. He's been the find of the league. He's got that physicality. He has an eye for goal, and he can score the frees and the 45s and 2-pointers, and he just seems a very level-headed lad. I think he's actually not certain of his age, but he's maybe mid-20s.
24, I think.
Yeah. So he's not just, coming in wet behind the ears. Obviously, you mentioned Derek Canavan, Darren McCurry, and then young Ronan Cassidy is a talent. I think he's playing within himself. Malik, he actually used him a bit at wing back earlier in the league. Didn't really work out. He didn't do much wrong, but it's a big ask of him if he does play at centre forward, but hopefully he will play somewhere in that half forward line. I would just like him to express himself a wee bit more. He's got a lot of ability. So Tyrone have players who can score a lot as well, and we're talking about Armagh's scoring. So that's something of hope for Tyrone, the scoring ability there in the team.
It's interesting because you're looking at a forward line that Owen McElhone can't get into.
That's one of the things I was going to ask about. What is we've 34-year-old Matty Donnelly still,
and flying,
and deservedly there.
Yeah.
But Owen McElhone was the great white hope, and hasn't been able to make the difference that.
Yeah,
or hasn't had the opportunity to make the difference.
It's just struggled. He's played plenty of football in the league, and he's just struggled a wee bit for scores.
Off the bench near enough,
bits and pieces, but he's played enough football to have some impact in the league, and he just hasn't been able to do that. And it's finding that wee bit of form. So does he not start? Because in the games that he was really effective last year, it was the games where he came off the bench. And is he going to be one of those players? I don't think so.
Game.
He was electric that day when he came on.
He lifted Tyrone that day.
Massively, and he turned the game.
It's just his sheer pace. Obviously he's got skill and finishing power as well.
Exactly, so-
But I think at this point, yeah, you don't start him. He has to prove himself when he comes on, and then he can maybe earn a starting place.
No player wants to be as a man who sits in this chair the odd week. So, no player wants to be that player that comes on to try and turn a game. But maybe that is his job at the minute. And you go for Ronan Cassidy, and you go for, even Darren McCurry's not sure of his place at the minute. Though I think he will play as well. And again, potential to shoot the lights out.
as he did last year. Again.
Absolutely. And then you have Derek Yannivan, who probably, since the end of the 24 season, probably hasn't been at his best, but has the potential to rip you to bits. So, it's all. And how long can you talk about potential? At some point, they have to do it.
Yeah.
In order for you to put them in that bracket. But Tyrone haven't done it repeatedly, but they're so capable of doing it that is the reason you can't discount them from winning. Because it's like anything. Like, Down gave Wexford confidence by not putting them away. If Armagh don't put Tyrone away, the longer Tyrone are in that game, the more they're going to grow into it.
That's
And
what
then
I'm
they
wondering,
look to
will
their
it be
bench.
a copy of last year, and so will Tyrone? Will that be the plan to kind of hang in there?
I don't think you can plan to hang in anymore, as in to hang in you have to score.
yeah, it's not possible really.
No,
with
you're
the
not.
rest
You're
of
not
the
hanging
it's
in
not-
a way of let's be 7 all at half
Get
time.
within 7 points.
No,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think you can do that anymore. But the hanging in that they'll be looking for is that you mentioned Ethan Jordan. Like, find somebody that loves you as much as Ethan Jordan loves shooting. Like, he loves shooting. Every time he gets the ball, he's having a go. And it's class. It doesn't matter if it's 55 metres out. He's swinging the right leg at it, and he can kick 2-pointers for fun. And if he catches fire, he could conceivably kick 2, 3, 4 2-pointers on Sunday. And all of a sudden, there's 6-8 points you've got out of nowhere. And then Matty Donnelly chips in with a couple, and you get a goal, and all of a sudden, you're starting to build a tally that brings you into a position where you could trouble this game. And Tyrone are so capable of that. That is the thing. They're so capable of actually doing this that it's not a foregone conclusion. But on the balance of everything that we do know, on the balance of what they are doing, I would have said that Armagh would win this game with a degree of comfort. And I just think that part of me still thinks that. Part of me still thinks that you can't judge Tyrone on what they're not doing. You have to judge them on they are missing chances. Even if they're winning kickouts, even if they're creating them, they're still missing them.
But
repeatedly.
Armagh have been missing a huge amount of chances as well.
Goal chances.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, but it's one of the things that, because of what I mentioned around their Tyrone's communication and the chances that they're giving away, I think Armagh will get goal chances. And then
Well, I think that's...
do they continue missing them? Do they go for them? Or if they bury a couple of them, then lights out.
I think that's why you have to go with Niall Morgan, as you said, probably a better shot stopper.
Definitely.
And if Armagh are going to have more goal chances, you want a better shot stopper between the posts.
Just a final thing before we wrap up, Cahair, and something you touched on earlier on about the following the crowd that's coming to these games, and the significance of that on Sunday. I suppose, from an Armagh perspective, I was at the Armagh Kerry game, and obviously they were 10 points down after 20 minutes, but the strength of the Armagh support has been talked about a lot, obviously, and it's a huge thing for them. But even when Cian McConville got that first point, the place just lifted completely, and that the impact that had on Armagh from there. And I just wonder with Tyrone, and it's a question we've been asking ourselves since 21, really, why or where, and we probably need another podcast to really thrash it out completely. But how is the drop off just so steep, especially after winning All Ireland? It's
Well, I would say, there's no excitement. There's no buzz, or very little.
but there's so much the underage success they've had. This is what it is.
Yeah,
what I
but you're
just-
talking
should
about
be.
the senior team. It's just, it hasn't been entertaining football since 2021. You get sporadic patches of absolute brilliance, often done by the Canavan brothers,
Yeah.
or
McCurry.
big Con Kilpatrick, careering through and thrashing a goal in. But a lot of the time, Tyrone still seem a wee bit stuck in the past of ball retention and patience. There isn't that bit of pace and going for it that supporters like to see, which you're having more and more of that in the modern game, and everybody, the Cahair can do all the calculations, but the scoring has gone up, and everybody knows that. But with Tyrone, there just isn't that excitement, and supporters want that bit of hope. We know all about the talent they have up front, and I would like to see a wee bit more, given a wee bit more license to thrill.
This is what I mean. No Cahair, like, I mean, an All Ireland semi final last year, all these underage teams, the talent that's coming through, like any other county support fan base would be delighted.
Musherman.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah.
It's there's a bit of a chicken and egg thing here with Tyrone. Like, the fans want to be entertained, they want to be watching entertaining games, but the emptiness of the ground contributes to the flatness of the spectacle. And it's like, it's a kind of a vicious cycle that they're caught in, and they can't get out of it. And like, I really thought when they won in Ballybofey last year, it was going to spark it. I thought, like, the Tyrone people are waiting for something to happen here that is just going to lift it back up again. And there you had it. You'd gone to Ballybofey and you'd beaten Donegal, and you were into an All-Ireland quarter final. You were going to play Dublin, and after that you were going to play Kerry, and it just never happened. The numbers didn't come out. And look, people within Tyrone have tried to analyse this at so many different junctures over the last 4 or 5 years, and whether part of it is fatigue of winning, which can, you see it in Kerry. Like, Kerry had to be corralled out the door by David Clifford. So there's a part of that too. Like, you can only win so long until people say, right, well, what's the next thing now? We're a bit bored of that. We've famously,
like Dublin's attendance is like dropped.
Absolutely,
like, as the more successful they were.
Absolutely, yeah. And like the thing of, Mickey Hart famously saying about giving off about the fans not even bothering to come onto the pitch one year after they won Ulster. So like there probably is a wee element of fatigue built into it. There was the quality thing that it started to drop off towards the tail end of the Mickey Hart reign, where people didn't like the style of football, rightly or wrongly. They just didn't buy into it. The fact that they won their All Ireland at a time where they couldn't really celebrate their All Ireland properly, they didn't create the buzz around the county that it would have in normal times. There's that to be built into it as well. You can talk about cost, you can talk about these things, but those things exist for all 32 counties. Tyrone, the cost is no different for Tyrone than it is for anybody else. So while it is a factor, I don't think it's, when you're looking at 12 or 13,000 Armagh game fans at home for every game, it's the same cost for them. So cost is down the list of things for me that is causing it. And there's just a real flatness about it. And I think it's a bit of a pity. Like, I think if that team, like, you would have seen it in Derry at times too, like, where, Celtic Park was empty and there'd been 500 people at league games, and that absolutely contributes to the team struggling to get out of that rut. And like, Tyrone could go there on Sunday, and I don't know, will they bring 2,000 fans, like, or 3,000 fans to a championship game in Armagh, which is bananas when you think about it.
The good thing is, obviously, going to the athletic grounds is really tough, but it's a brilliant venue. It's that sort of tight feel about it. You crowds on top of the pitch, and yeah, it might be a small Tyrone support, but if the players can give them something to feed off, and if they can be patient with the players and back them, you can get that real lift. You mentioned there with Armagh, their supporters helping them against Kerry, and the Armagh support has been brilliant in recent years. They're so loyal, and they got their reward 2 years ago. Tyrone supporters nearly need to do that and just have a bit of belief in the team, have a bit of hope. I know I started off with giving them none, but just there. And it's such an exciting venue to be at whenever it's a close game and things are getting hot and heavy, and maybe that could help Tyrone a bit.
Something has to spark. Like, we've seen it, like, even Mayo dropped off, who were famously mad followers, like, and they fell off a cliff for a few years there. Now they're back, and Andy Moran has given them fresh life, and it just needs a spark. But I just felt that, and we're saying it needs a spark, but I felt that the spark was there last year. There were opportunities that should have really sparked a rebirth of it, and it didn't happen, and that would worry me. And that, it's not that, everybody has suddenly lost interest in the GAA in Tyrone. That's obviously not the case, and the club scene is mad, and the crowds that go to club championship games are insane, and club league games are like you would genuinely get more sometimes at a club league game
Then go to see
than maybe
Tyrone.
go to see Tyrone, like, which is an incredible thing to say. And I don't know. I don't know how they get, because I think lots of smarter people than me and lots of people closer to it than me have examined it and looked at it and thought, how do we, resolve this? And they don't seem to have a solution other than the team just needs to start winning things. And look, they probably need an Ulster final to generate a big crowd this year, and like that's a tough path in Ulster final. Like, and imagine they're in Armagh on Sunday, and they're in a position where they're a point up with 10 minutes to go. Imagine if there were 6,000 or 7,000 of them in there. Like that would energise the team to probably get over the line. If there's 1,500 of them, it's just a different thing. It's just
what we need, and I know you boys are gonna laugh at me here, but Tyrone are too nice at the minute. They need that bit of ricey spark and aggro. And I was talking to Donal O'Neill recently, and he was reminiscing about a match that he was at, and Eugene McKenna and one of the Grimleys went up for a ball in the square and started boxing ahead of each other. It was a Railway Cup match. They were playing on the same team, the same Ulster team. So that's what this Tyrone Armagh match needs from a Tyrone perspective. A wee bit of that, of just going, really want to beat these guys, So
back to the glory. What a perfect way to come full circle and finish this episode off. Yeah, just that's what we need to,
turn the cameras off,
yeah.
throw the ball
just
in.
leave it that. Guys, that's going to do us for this week.
not quite for this week.
No, sorry, not for this week. It's going to do us for this week. But we will be back with a bonus podcast on Wednesday, subscriber only podcast. Myself and Cahair will be joined by Stephen Campbell, who you've seen here in the last number of weeks, and Kevin Cassidy. Donegal's Kevin Cassidy will be coming into the studio as well for a chat about all things Cahair, the full enchilada.
Interesting that they picked Armagh and Donegal. Like, are they saying Derry aren't in the top two then? Is that what they're trying to tell us?
Just tell Cass to switch his mobile off anyway.
Fair enough. But yes, so we'll be doing that. That'll be up on Wednesday, as I say, subscriber only. But look, thank you very much to Kenny and Cahair for joining me today. We also would like to say thank you to our sponsor, Find Insurance NI, your local commercial insurance broker. And remember to listen and watch wherever you get the podcast. We'll see you on Wednesday.